The forests of Belgium were supposed to be quiet until hell froze over. In December 1944, Bastogne, just a crossroads town, became the center of the Battle of the Bulge, where 7 vital roads meant life or death for the entire Allied Battle front. Surrounded and outnumbered, American paratroopers faced not just the enemy, but the full fury of winter. How did Bastogne become the town that wouldn't surrender? The answer changed the fate of the war. December 19th, 1944. The men of the 101st Airborne Division rolled into Bastogne under urgent orders, trucks grinding to a halt on snow-choked roads. 7 highways, each one a lifeline, converged at this small Belgian town. Roads that, if lost, would split the Allied front and open the way for German tanks to Antwerp. Commanders gathered around creased maps, tracing the web of routes with gloved fingers, knowing the enemy was closing in from every direction. There was no time for hesitation. Paratroopers slung rifles and began digging, shovels biting into frozen earth that clanged like iron. Foxholes took shape in the hard ground. Shallow at first, then deeper as the threat grew more real with every distant thump of artillery. Staff officers, McAuliffe now in command, moved between clusters of men, relaying positions, assigning sectors, and marking the perimeter. Engineers and infantry spread out along the main approaches, setting up roadblocks with anything they could find: wrecked vehicles, felled trees, sandbags, and wire. The 10th Armored's tanks rumbled into place at key crossroads, their engines idling against the cold. Civilians peered from behind cracked windows, watching as the town transformed into a fortress overnight. The urgency was written on every face. If the crossroads fell, the entire Allied line could unravel. But for now, the men of the 101st dug in, surrounded by the hush of snow and the knowledge that every inch of ground mattered. By nightfall, the ring of foxholes and barricades around Bastogne was all that stood between the German army and the open road west. By dawn on December 20th, the last road out of Bastogne had vanished behind enemy lines. The world narrowed to a ring of foxholes, barricades, and battered stone houses. German artillery signaled the new reality, shells falling in the fields, shattering walls, and sending families scrambling for shelter beneath the streets. In cellars crowded with townspeople, the air grew thick with candle smoke and prayers. Belgian nurses passed between the wounded, using torn bed sheets for bandages and boiling snow for water. Soldiers clung to their rifles and each other, boots frozen to their feet, rations dwindling to scraps. The cold pressed in from every side. Nighttime temperatures dropped below -10 degrees Celsius, breath freezing in the air, frost creeping over blankets and skin. Medics recorded more frostbite than gunshot wounds. In the aid station on Rue Neuf-Chateau, Dr. John Pryor scrawled in his diary by flashlight, noting how morphine and penicillin ran out before the week was done. Cognac, when it could be found, became the only anesthetic. Augusta Chewy and Renee Lemaire, both local nurses, hauled the wounded down cellar steps, their hands raw and faces streaked with ash. Outside, the steady thud of distant artillery and the crack of ice underfoot replaced any sense of normalcy. Civilians rationed potatoes and bread, slipping food to American patrols when they could. The siege was more than a line on a map. It was hunger, shivering, and the silent hope that someone, somewhere would break the circle. Men fought not just the enemy, but the cold itself. December 22nd brought a new kind of silence to Bastogne, the kind that comes before a verdict. Shortly after midday, a white flag car rolled up to the American lines, its windows frosted and its passengers stiff with formality. 2 German officers stepped out, faces set, and handed over a sealed letter addressed to the American commander. The message, signed by General von Lutwitz, warned of the complete destruction of the encircled American forces if Bastogne did not surrender. The offer was called honorable, but the threat beneath it was unmistakable. The note was delivered to Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, who read it once, then tossed it on the table. For a moment, the room was quiet. Then McAuliffe muttered a single word, "Nuts," as if swatting away a fly. His staff chuckled, but the moment demanded an official reply. Lieutenant Colonel Kinnard scrawled the word onto a sheet of paper and handed it back to the German delegation. Confused, the envoys asked for clarification. Colonel Harper, tasked with delivering the answer, simply told them, "It means go to hell." Word of McAuliffe's reply shot through the ranks like a jolt of electricity. Men who had been shivering in the snow grinned for the first time in days. Some laughed, others shook their heads in disbelief, but all understood what it meant. There would be no surrender. In the foxholes and aid stations, soldiers passed the news along with the last of their cigarettes. The message was clear. Bastogne would hold, no matter what came next. The siege had turned from a question of survival to a declaration of defiance. In that moment, the defenders of Bastogne were locked into a fight that would define them. Their spirits lifted not by supplies or reinforcements, but by a single stubborn word. Snow drifted through the broken roofs of Bastogne as the siege tightened. The sound of artillery never faded, sometimes muffled by thick fog, sometimes sharp enough to rattle the glass in shattered windows. On the outskirts, American squads crouched behind barricades of rubble and frozen earth, scanning for movement through the white haze. Each farmhouse and hedgerow became a strong point, defended by men who had not slept in days. Medics dragged sleds improvised from doors across open fields, risking sniper fire to reach the wounded. In the cellars beneath the town, Belgian nurses and army doctors worked by flashlight, hands numb, using cognac for anesthesia when morphine ran out. On December 23rd, the clouds finally broke. The distant hum of engines grew into a roar as hundreds of C-47s swept low over the treetops, dropping bundles that burst in the snow. Ammunition, food, blankets, penicillin. Paratroopers scrambled from foxholes, racing to gather whatever landed inside the perimeter. Some supplies fell into German hands, but enough reached the defenders to keep them fighting. For a moment, hope returned, carried on parachutes of white and olive drab. Christmas Eve brought no truce. Shells crashed into the town, setting buildings alight. In the ruins of a makeshift hospital, Nurse Renée Lemaire lost her life shielding the wounded from fire. That night, soldiers huddled in frozen trenches, scribbling letters home by candle stub. "It's Christmas, but the only gifts are survival and hope," one wrote. The words echoed through the darkness, a fragile promise that the siege would not break them. By morning, frost rhymed every helmet and rifle, but the men of Bastogne endured, waiting, watching, holding on for relief that had not yet come. Engines thundered to life as Patton's Third Army turned north, steel tracks grinding over frozen roads. On Christmas Eve, new orders rippled through the columns. Bastogne must be reached at any cost. The 4th Armored Division led the way, headlights cutting through the darkness, tanks and trucks packed nose to tail on narrow lanes slick with ice. Commanders hunched over maps, plotting the fastest route through villages and forests battered by shellfire. Crews kept radios tuned for updates, every mile a gamble against German roadblocks and mines. Drivers fought exhaustion, hands numb on the wheel, eyes fixed on the compass. The road to Bastogne twisted through wrecked hamlets and snow-choked fields, but the pace never faltered. With every passing hour, the sound of engines grew louder in the distance, a promise that the siege might soon be broken. Late on December 26, the first Sherman tanks of the 4th Armored Division broke through the southern roadblock near Ardennes. Lieutenant Bogas climbed from his tank and ascended a hand to a mud-caked paratrooper of the 326th Engineers, both men too tired to speak, but grinning through cracked lips. In that moment, the siege was broken. Radios crackled with the news, and relief swept the battered defenders. Medics began loading the wounded onto waiting vehicles, while tank crews passed out rations and cigarettes. Across the fields, German troops pulled back under covering fire, abandoning positions they had held for a week. For the first time since December 20th, the men of Bastogne could breathe. The worst was over, but the Ardennes still echoed with distant gunfire. Between December 19th and 26, 1944, Bastogne's defenders faced temperatures as low as -20 degrees Celsius, constant artillery fire, and severe shortages of food and medical supplies. The 101st Airborne, alongside Belgian civilians and medics, held their ground despite being outnumbered and surrounded for 7 days. Their refusal to surrender, marked by General McAuliffe's single-word reply, "nuts," is documented in both Allied and German records. Yet not every story from the siege has been told. Some medical logs, civilian testimonies, and after-action reports remain incomplete or lost, leaving gaps in our understanding of daily survival inside the town. Today, the crossroads at Bastogne stands as a symbol of resistance and sacrifice, reminding us that strategic decisions and human endurance shape the outcome of the Battle of the Bulge. The siege was lifted on December 26th, but the fight for the Ardennes and the fate of Europe was not yet decided. The defenders of Bastogne held the line, cold, starving, surrounded, but unbroken. Their defiance turned the tide of the Ardennes, but the war was far from over. Because even as Bastogne stood firm, Hitler prepared one last desperate gamble. Continue the story in our next episode, The Final Counterattack, and if you haven't already, subscribe to Historic War Stories to make sure these moments of courage, sacrifice, and history are never forgotten.